Steve Rao, the host of Pod and Roku TV's World Edition. I'm here for a few minutes, and before we begin our monologue today, um, I want to welcome you to the show where we talk about global affairs, innovation, and ever increasing turbulent world politically, economically, and I'm going to devote my monologue today to a recent tragedy which occurred at UNC Chapel Hill. Before I get into some of the other things going on in the world, and the bottom line is that yesterday there was a shooting at UNC where my daughter is a senior. She's out of the country right now. Three of my son's friends, best friends, attend as freshmen, and this was against a professor who was shot in a lab. The school is still on lockdown. Just a very shocking day in the state of North Carolina on the second week of school, really classes really beginning after the getting ready for Labor Day. And it really brought back memories to me when I started college that I wanted college to be a place where we all could get experiences and learn and explore and the most exciting time of our life, and how it's been ruined by many the freshmen and people that attend because of a massive shooting, people in absolute fear. I think at the end of the day, the concern I have is that we had 25,000 gun homicides in the United States in 2023. We have 4% of the population, but it owns 60% of the guns. And for those who say it's a mental health issue, I just really wonder. Yes, it's true. Those that are mentally ill are getting access to these guns. It's true that there are Second Amendment rights, and there's many lawful gun owners out there. And so it's not fair um, that we just say that all gun owners are having this problem. But the fact of the matter is that we have today 150 times more gun violence than Great Britain, 250 times more than Japan, and it doesn't mean that we have, in my opinion, 250 times more mentally ill people in the United States of America. The fact of the matter is, where gun violence has gone down, there's been very significant legitimate gun control laws, ranging from background checks to things like that. Um, and so I think we have a problem in America, and I hope that we can come to some solution about it. This isn't a Democrat or Republican issue, as a commentator on the show. This is an issue that all of us need to be concerned about. Do we want our universities to be places where our kids go to learn and aspire to careers and exciting things? Or do we want it to be a place where they're afraid they could be shot down, even if it's a random incident? And for those of you that are listening saying, well, that was just a one-time thing, I'm going to go to bed at night and hope everything's okay. Well, that's not the case. This can happen today in any elementary school, in any high school, in any grocery store, in any theater, and you're not safe. So this is all of our problems, and I know some people may disagree with me, but I think we've got to figure out a way to address this issue. With that being said, much going around the world. Uh, our Commerce Secretary met with the Chinese Premier, which should have been an interesting meeting. We're bracing for a major storm coming in. Yesterday was the 60th anniversary of Dr. Martin Luther King. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Hoping bringing former State Senator Floyd McKissick on the show to talk about the legacy of his father and the dream 60 years later. And of course, the shootings in Jacksonville have everyone up in arms, which were racially motivated. I probably missed other issues, but at the end of the day, I just want to pray for the families of UNC Chapel Hill, uh, Kevin Getzkowitz, my friend, the chancellor, all the professors, and hope, glad that we have the person in custody who was responsible for this crime, and only hope now that we can move forward with um, addressing the solution and a problem and seeing how we can come together and deal with the situation. But we just got too many guns in America, and they're getting in the hands of the wrong people. But with that being said, let's bring in Mark and our guest. I'm only here for about 10 minutes. Mark,
No
thank you for
problem.
that. I had to sort of dedicate my monologue to the gun incident. I think it was a big deal happening here, and it's just kind of scary.
No, it was definitely scary. I was actually going to work yesterday, and when I got to work, my boss at the Hayti Heritage Center was actually just leaving work because she actually lives in Chapel Hill, so she wasn't. She had to wait for them to uh, let people back into town because this campus was on lockdown. I believe her daughter was actually on campus at the time, and everything along those lines. And of course, even the Jacksonville incident had some ties to me as well because some friends of mine actually moved to that city. So I know that I need to reach out to Ngoma and Norma Dean, a husband and wife team that moved there actually to take care of her of his elderly sister and of other reasons that they moved as well. But that was definitely something that was of concern, and that was actually what we talked about yesterday was elderly care and all along those lines, and definitely long-term health and in that space. So definitely our hearts go out to those that were in that area and all along those lines. I know that you've got a child, speaking of children, that are going to NC State, and our guest is actually from NC
Yeah.
State area and NC State graduate and all along those lines. And I know that one of the things that he talks about, and definitely he may even have some thoughts around how it can tie together, is the fact of pet therapy and all along those lines. And actually, he's of the opinion, I want to say that it's featured in the book, that that could actually even help with some of the folks that are going to college, because I know that college is actually included in what you talk about with pet therapy. I don't know how the university folks are going to feel about everybody having a dog or a cat on their campus and all along their lives, but I don't know if you have any thoughts as to how extensive the pet therapy should be and all along those lines. But I do know that whether it is the situation with folks that are going to class, I know that there are some companies that are looking at having pets on board to help calm down incidences and things along those lines. So definitely it will be interested to find out what your thoughts are about that. And actually, Lee Newton Rhodes says he has a niece who does horse therapy. And I know some people around here that are part of, he's one of our other panelists who are part of the autism community. And there's a group here called Bright Star. And I know that they use those horses for therapy as well. But just tell us a little bit about how important Scrappy was to you in, I guess, the last couple of years, and how extensive should this program be?
Well, Scrappy was vital to our time together. And even now, going forward, she's still very much a part of the activities that I'm pursuing. And for 8 years, we were a pet therapy team at a local children's hospital. And it was during that time that I began to realize just how positive pet therapy truly is, not just on the patients, but their families who are worried about their children taking care, but even on a grander scale, the nurses and the doctors who have to deal with these traumas every single day. Pet therapy allows those individuals the opportunity to kind of decompress for a little bit because medical research has shown that the simple act of petting a dog will lower your blood pressure, lower your heart rate, lower your anxiety, and at the same time actually increase your mental alertness. So it has tremendous medical and physical benefits that we're really just beginning to understand. You know, dogs and animals have been part of our lives for many, many years, but the true benefit of what they can provide us is really just beginning to get understood on a scientific level. And we have seen pet therapy used extensively in hospitals. So they greatly understand the benefit. But one of the things that I'm trying to accomplish is to expand the use of pet therapy. And corporations and colleges are two of those areas. And the reason for that is that these are two large populations where stress and anxiety is a normal part of our lives. You know, it's stressful sometimes to go to the corporate office and deal with some of the things that we have to deal with. Same thing applies on the college level. And as Stephen appropriately described the situation in Chapel Hill yesterday, this is exactly the situation where pet therapy would become a great benefit for everyone involved. But there's a major challenge. And the challenge is in the entire United States, there's only 50,000 certified pet therapy teams. And let me rephrase that in a different way because 50,000 is a key number, but certified is really the most important thing because we don't want to have dogs and cats running loose on campus. Pet therapy is a controlled event. It's an experience. And so to have 50,000 certified pet therapy teams in the United States simply isn't enough because there's nearly 20 million college students in the entire United States. So one of the things that we're trying to do is work with universities and corporations to educate everyone about the positive benefits of pet therapy, medical benefits that come with it, but then engage their community, their campus. And Chancellor Guskovich said the important things yesterday in his press conference. He kept referring to community, the Chapel Hill community. That's what we want to stress as well. You have your own community right there on campus, whether it's a college or a corporation. And it's really become dependent upon that community now to accept a greater role and responsibility in the healing that is going to have to take place on that Chapel Hill campus right now and every other campus around the country. And so what we try to do is engage everyone. We want anyone that has an interest in learning about pet therapy, who has a dog, that would be interested in learning how to go through the training process to become certified to participate with us on your campus. This way, when trauma and tragedy like happened yesterday, you now have a task force. You have a service organization that is already established on your campus, by your campus, for your campus, to respond to these types of situations and needs. And really what it's going to allow everyone to do is to bring tranquility from a place of trauma. And that's going to be the first phase of healing. We're not trying to be counselors, but what we want to do is be able to provide that relief, that moment of tranquility that everyone needs, whether it's a college campus or corporation campus, to kind of get their mind back in line in order to improve their day, their week, their lives, and focus on the task at hand.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense and everything. Now, is it just strictly dogs? I mean, you mentioned cats as well. Are there other animals? Because I do know that in some therapy organizations, there are people that have used things as far-ranging as guinea pigs and even chickens and other animals. So I was wondering how extensive is the amount of animals that are being used?
Dogs are the largest population, obviously. There's 69 million dog households in the United States. That is by far the largest group of animal pets. And so that's one of the reasons why we kind of focus in that area. But to your point, there are pet therapy organizations that incorporate rabbits. I've heard of ducks. I've got a friend that uses miniature donkeys at nursing homes. And as one of your listeners wrote in, therapy horses. So there's a wide range of animals that participate in pet therapy. The most important thing is really to make sure that the animal has the proper temperament. And the temperament needs to be friendly, available to adapt to strangers, not get overly excited, and be able to manage different situations.
Are there any limitations? I know Lee had asked this question as well to the size of the animals or to concerns about people's allergies and other things along those lines, because I do know that that is concerned. I actually had the pleasure of interviewing not that long ago a lady that was a stewardess, and she was actually talking about the fact that there was a kangaroo on their plane, and I think the kangaroo was actually a service animal, and all along those lines. So I was just wondering if you had heard any of those kind of things and whether there were restrictions that you are concerned about. And I do know people that have pet allergies or aversions to pets, not just because of allergies, but sometimes because of incidences when they were kids as well. So how do you deal with those situations also?
Absolutely. And that's a great point. Allergies is always a concern. And any issues that might have happened as a child, any anxieties, fears towards a particular animal. I'm going to go back to what I said early on, and that is when you take into consideration pet therapy, it is a controlled event. So an announcement would go out that there's going to be pet therapy available at this part of campus, for example. And so that allows anyone that has an interest to come to that, and they can announce whether it's a dog, cat, horse, whatever the case might be, so that anyone that receives that notice can determine for themselves if this is something that they want to participate in. So this is going to be managed effectively, and it's going to be managed efficiently. But it does create issues because there is a complete misunderstanding of exactly what pet therapy is as it relates to other types of animals. There are emotional support dogs and animals that are trained to sense, if you will, a particular event. So if someone has extreme anxiety, I met a lady in an airport who had an emotional support dog. And whenever she got over anxious, the dog would jump in her lap and put his paws on her chest just to calm her down. He had the ability to sense that need and was trained accordingly. Service dogs are there to provide a specific function, whether it could be opening a door, a guide dog for the blind, for example. Those are service animals. Pet therapy animals are there to provide emotional support. Even though there is very specific training involved, pet therapy is really just to kind of bring you back down to a lower place of gravity and get that anxiety out of your system. And so those are things that just need to be understood first and foremost. But then as it relates to the types of animals, it really just is whatever the handler, the owner of the animal is comfortable with. So again, there's a wide variety of different types of animals. But the most important thing from a pet therapy perspective is that number one, the animal have um, a temperament that is soothing, comfortable, friendly with strangers. But really, the most important thing is that they must be certified, both the animal and the handler, because along with that certification comes insurance protection. So, should something negative happen, we want to make sure that everybody's going to be protected, not only medically, but from a liability perspective as well. And that's the difference with any type of animal service, is that these animals are in fact certified. They've been trained, they've got the documentations to verify that, and it's not just something that you get off the internet.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. One of the other things I was curious about is how much work you are doing with other type of therapies, and then there is a second question that goes with that because I was actually just talking yesterday evening to be exact, with a friend of mine that had been participating on Duke's campus with music therapy. So it's him and a team of about 7 musicians, and they were going around. And actually, one of the musicians, he told me, knew how to do certain kind of music in such a way that it could calm the heart of somebody that was in a panicked situation or that needed their heart rate lowered to a very low level and everything along those lines. I think he mentioned one that was a NICU patient and all along those lines. So I was wondering, how much do you work in conjunction with, say, music therapy? Because one of the concerns that he had, and that was the second part of my question, was he wasn't sure that that program was still active at Duke because he had participated in several years back with several different musicians of different genres and all along those lines. But funding is oftentimes an issue. So he was not sure that that program was still active. And I needed to do some research to find out if it is or isn't. But how is it in terms of the funding? And also, do you work with other kind of things such as music therapy?
Well, the funding is a very important part because as an advocate for pet therapy, when we visit hospitals or corporations or any type of location, we're not compensated. This is a volunteer organization. I want to take that term volunteer to a much higher level because it's truly philanthropy. And that's the way that people should really evaluate and judge it. We are donating not just time, but our asset is the animal. In the event of the music therapy, we have participated with some music therapists, and that's another area where the medical research is really just getting started to understand what truly happens to your body when you hear that music play and the soothing sounds that come into your system and the impact that it has. Um, but it's the same. You know, these are philanthropists given of their time and their skills, and they're not financially being rewarded to them. The financial reward is giving back. And so some people are in a much better position to be able to deal with that than others, obviously. And so that's why some of these programs are going to either continue or discontinue, unfortunately. We have participated in the past with some music therapists, and it's really just depends on where you want to go and how you want to manage it, and with the location where you plan to go, because each location may have specific restrictions. And so the music might be able to take place in one area. And much like we were talking about before with certain patients, there could be allergies that we have to be alert to. So sometimes that combination does not work. But it's a great combination, a great fit in my mind to bring the two together.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm going to bring in Lee Newton Rhodes as well as Jacoby, and I'll see if Shaquille's ready from down in Australia as well. So bring him on, as well as definitely bringing on none other than there was one other one that was ready to grab. That was Sasha Starr, and all along those lines. So definitely we've got folks, and Nick may join us as well. What is your own background? And I know that you're a pet activist and a pet therapist activist as well, but I'm just wondering, was this what kind of corporation and kind of work you had done, and whether you were able to bring it into your workplace as well? Because I know earlier you said that you had majored in textile engineering and all in that space, but definitely wondering if you were able to bring it into your corporate environment in addition to the home environment.
Well, I've many years ago transitioned out of the textile world and started my own financial services business. I started with Merrill Lynch, spent some time with Northwestern Mutual, all in upstate New York. I've transitioned about 25 years ago into my own firm. And to your point, yes, my dog is with me every single day. And I think that helps ground me a little bit, keep me focused on what's important for me and my clients, and so that I don't get too emotional as to what's going on with the markets on a daily basis. But we have worked with a variety of different companies, a lot of companies out on the West Coast. Thank you, Nick, for bringing your puppy on board.
She's always with me.
There you go. See, you understand.
Get rid of her.
That's right.
She's awful.
Mine is with my mother at the moment, keeping her attentive. But to your point, Mark, about the types of corporations that we have done work with, obviously out on the West Coast, there's a lot of technology where dog participation is not unusual. We've seen it out in Silicon Valley. But again, the distinction is that it's not truly pet therapy. These are organizations that have simply allowed their employees to bring their dog to work, and they kind of stay right there at the desk. Pet therapy would allow that dog to go visit other people, whether it's inside or outside the corporation. And the companies that we've worked with in New York specifically, one of the things that we realized is that these were kind of mid-sized companies. And when you bring pet therapy in, not only do the employees get excited, but what it allows is the engagement and participation of employees that ordinarily may never interact. So you may have some, let's say, mid-level employees finally get the opportunity to meet one of the executives, because the executives want to, feel the love of a dog as well. And so that interaction within the corporation is allowing a greater amount of teamwork to evolve. We've seen it on the college level as well. And so that's really some of the benefits that we've seen. And we start with some of the small companies. But again, what we want to do is actually get the employees that have dogs, that have an interest in learning about pet therapy, to actually become trained and certified. And that's part of the process that our new organization, Delta Omega Gamma, actually provides. So again, it's more inclusive, it's more in-house from a pet therapy perspective, because in order to try to get outside pet therapy organizations to participate, sometimes it's just a real challenge because they are on such high demand. The demand for pet therapy visitations is significantly greater than the supply. And that's one of the issues that we're trying to address. With only 50,000 with only 50,000 certified pet therapy teams in the United States, I want to get that number to 200,000.
Wow. And I know that. So, Nick, the next time we have one of those meetings and you bring Tilly, it's pet therapy. I now understand that. So I can have that. So I know that he oftentimes brings the dog with him when we have our monthly meetings and all along those lines. So now I know that it is a form of pet therapy when that is happening and everything. If the other folks have got questions, and I know that definitely Shaquille oftentimes will acknowledge the fact that there are authors in the house and all along those lines, but I'll turn it over to my other esteemed panelists and all along those lines. And of course, we'll get back to the gun shootings and a number of other issues that are in the world as well. But if you want to stick around, you can definitely do that also. But I'm enjoying the conversation. But if anybody has any other thoughts or questions, I turn it over to my other esteemed panelists.
Well, I think we could just bring up the name of our guest's book. And I'll certainly say for those people that are outside of the United States, it is available on Amazon. Certainly in Australia and the UK, I've already checked and I've already bought my copy. So,
what's the name of the book?
It's called A Tale of Love.
Okay.
TAIL. Life Lessons from Scrappy, a Pet Therapy Dog.
Okay.
Amazon and Barnes and Noble.
Insofar as the comment made by our guest that it can help you to become more alert, I mean, some of the pets that I've got, which have been cats, certainly make me more alert because I need to make sure they're not destroying something in the house. But as somebody who is as a greyhound owner, obviously, I can tell you that having a pet in your life, which unfortunately I don't currently have because I travel so much, but having a pet in your life, I think is a very positive thing for families, for children. And certainly for people that need a little bit of companionship, especially as they get older, or if they have mobility issues and things like that, pets can be a great addition to most people's homes.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Toby, any thoughts on everything? I know you've got a couple of pets in your life as well, in addition to the kids that sometimes pop on, but they're not pets. But definitely you have the pets as well. So any thoughts about the conversation?
Actually, I had a few questions because I may have missed it earlier in the discussion. Because I mean, pets are a beautiful thing. As Mark points out, matter of fact, my dog, she's knocked out right now. We went on a long walk yesterday, so she's taking a break today. And how do you go about, I guess, acquiring the pets to become therapy animals? Because I know there's that backup with the ASPCAs, and are you able to grab animals from the ASPCA and train them to become therapy pets?
Absolutely. And that's really the beauty of pet therapy. It doesn't really matter. Again, the main thing is that the dog have the right temperament, and you're going to figure that out real fast. I tell people all the time, do you love your dog? Of course. Well, do you think your dog loves you? I say, well, of course. Well, then likely your dog is going to love somebody else as well. And so my most recent dog, it took me 4 years, excuse me, to get a new dog after Scrappy passed away. But I now have Angel, and she was a rescue. I got her as a puppy. She was 2 months old. She's going to be 6 months this month. But we have been working with her to go through the training to be certified as pet therapy one day. And with pet therapy, your dog needs to be at least a year old. And so we've got some additional time. I still question whether or not she's going to be a pet therapy dog. She just has some habits that I haven't been able to break yet. But any animal that has the proper temperament, that just loves people, and the one thing that I love about Angel is that I've never seen an animal love humans more than this beautiful creature. She gets too excited, and that's the issue that I have to kind of, let her calm down a little bit, and hopefully some of that's going to come with age. But that's really how the pet therapy evaluation is going to begin. And then there's certain skills that they must satisfy. In fact, we've just loaded on our website, deltaomegagamma.net, training videos that will take you through each of the skill sets that have to be satisfied in order to be considered a certified pet therapy team. And I stress the word team because it's not just the dog. You, as the handler, must also satisfy some of these evaluations as well.
You had another question, Joey?
Well, I know that. How do you go about, because just as you ended it there, talking about individuals needing to change their mentality to understand that it's not just the dog or the animal itself. How do you judge if a person has the right temperament?
That's a great question. And I think there's going to be a couple of ways to do that. One is you're going to see, just like how the dog interacts with people and other dogs, how does that person interact with other people and other dogs? Are they friendly to everybody? And that's really the bottom line. Pet therapy is all about friendship. It's about the emotional attachment that is going to be shared with whoever it is that you're visiting with. So as long as the human has that ability, more than likely the animal is going to have the ability as well, because there's an exchange of emotions there, both between the owner and the animal. So that's one thing. I think one thing that needs to be stressed and understood is that as part of the certification process, the handler is going to have to go through a background check. The last thing we want is someone going into an elementary school that should not be going into an elementary school. So there's basically 4 or 5 national organizations that represent pet therapy organizations. They set the criteria as to what the skills are, what the background and training has to be for both the dog and the handler. And until those get satisfied, you are not going to be a certified pet therapy team.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. If anybody else has got any questions, and also Larry, if you can tell us how your organization can be reached and everything, and then we'll get into some of the other conversations about the news. And of course, you're welcome to stick around for that and describe what can happen sometimes during that time. And like I said, you're welcome to stick around if you want to, and all along those lines. Maybe anybody else has any questions, then go for it.
I just got a practical question. It really is comment because it's not really a question. This happened to a friend of mine's son who was traveling on an airplane, and he goes to his seat. In his seat, there was like A, B, and C, so his was the middle seat. And evidently, a husband and wife brought a big pit bull on the plane as a therapy dog, and that's all fine and dandy. But this is a really big dog that couldn't just sit by the feet of the woman. And what these people did is they took seats A and C and left open, and they didn't take the middle seat, next to each other. And they expected this kid, like this 14-year-old boy, to sit in the middle seat with a dog all over him. And he says, I'm not sitting there. Why don't you guys sit together? And they refused to move together. I mean, how do we deal with this as a society where people have these dogs, sometimes very large dogs or other animals with, I don't know if the attitude is the right word, because they're entitled to take them because they're therapy animals, but sometimes it's at the inconvenience of other people. And sometimes people have phobias, real ones, with dogs or whatever animals, and they don't know that when they're booking a seat on an airplane that there's going to be an animal there.
Lee, I think you're bringing up hopefully an anomaly of a situation. But
I hope so also.
In my thinking, it comes down to one word: respect. And as humans, we've got to be able to respect each other and deal with what is sensible. And obviously, in that particular situation, I would say that's just not very logical. It's not very sensible. But I think that's where, in the past, that has been a major problem, because people will use the term emotional support animal loosely. And I've said from the beginning, the difference in all of these 3 genres of animals, every single one of them has to be certified. And when you become certified, you have documentation.
This was a legitimate case. It was.
Okay. But in that particular situation, again, I think it comes down to respect for all the other passengers and why they couldn't accommodate that situation a little bit better.
They insisted they bought these seats. They insisted they bought seats A and C. They didn't buy seat B.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then unfortunately, when I traveled with Scrappy, Scrappy was 5 pounds. She was tiny,
Okay.
but she fit underneath the seat in front of me. Those were the rules. She
I
was
don't
in
think.
her own
Yeah, I don't think
carrier.
they have them anymore. Maybe they should.
Well,
They should. Yeah.
yeah, I agree. And so this is something that we would really have to work with the airlines to get regulated and get that established. But again, it really just comes down to respect.
In the classrooms, also, 100%.
Yeah,
I
no,
agree. And when we talk to colleges and universities, the one thing that we stress is we do not want the dogs in the classroom. They become a distraction. Again, pet therapy is an event, and this is something that must be controlled. It should be managed. And if you're going to have your animal in the classroom at all times, and we've run into this where professors just bring their dogs to campus, and it's created an issue. And so we work with the administration. We help them set guidelines because each campus is unique. We want to work with them to create their own program. But the other thing that we want to do is we want to bring campus security involved too, because we want to make sure that, again, it does not turn into a dog park and where you just have animals running loose on campus and everybody thinks that that's pet therapy. That's not what it is at all. And so with our programs, working with faculty, staff, and students who have an interest in pet therapy and become certified, the one things that we ask is that they carry their credentials so that should they get stopped by campus security and just want to make sure that they know who they are, they can pull out the credentials and verify that in fact they have been certified, they've been trained, and they are in fact part of the Delta Omega Gamma pet therapy service organization for that campus.
and how can one get in touch with you for the organization and everything? What is the website and all along those lines?
It's deltaomegagamma.net.
Okay, so that's easy for folks to remember. So hopefully folks will get that and definitely have a chance to get to that situation and definitely learn more about pet therapy and maybe even help you get to that goal of quadrupling the number of therapy dogs that are here in the United States. Are you also making it a global initiative? Because I know that you said it was primarily in the United States, but I didn't know if it was also something that you're working with the global community because we are a global network.
Right now, it's strictly the U.S. We do have some interest in Canada. We've spoken with people in England. England is way ahead of the game. I will say that clearly. But right now, our attention is really just focused on the mental health and wellness of our employees and students right here in the United States.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense and everything. I don't know
Are
if
you-
anybody else go ahead.
Yeah. I know you're working. Well, are you also working with like the VA and the other, elderly homes, especially the retirement communities, or the mental health wards as well? I didn't know if you were working with those at all too.
Yeah, absolutely. Anywhere there's a need for any type of mental wellness, whether it's anxiety or anything of that sort, you're going to find pet therapy. And so these visitations are robust. And to kind of put things in perspective, I did a book signing in Denver, Colorado, and there's a great pet therapy organization called Pet Partners. And when I do the book signing, I invite the local pet therapy organizations to participate with me. And so one of the leaders said, Larry, we're one of the largest pet therapy organizations in the country. They have 300 philanthropists that participate in their certified pet therapy program. She goes, I could have 1,300 and still not have enough. And that's when things became clear to me that we need a strategy to go from 50 to 200 as quickly as possible. And that's why we are really focusing on these large campus locations, whether it's a corporation, a nursing home, um, courtrooms even are using pet therapy now because they begin to understand that the dogs have a way of bringing down anxiety and tension. And college campuses as well. So that's where our focus is trying to build the numbers, but also trying to address the needs that are so dire in need of these students and employees.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Oh, we're going to get into some of the other issues of the day. Like I said earlier and everything, I've actually got to, and we'll stay on the animal side of things for a minute because I did see an animal story that ironically was coming out of Australia, Shaquille, and all along those lines. And I know that we as humans oftentimes are knowing that there are all kinds of things that are in our body and all in that space. We try to control them, whether that is microbes or other things. But apparently there was a neurosurgeon that removed a live worm from a woman's brain in a world's first discovery. So that is what's going on. And that took place, ironically, there, Shaquille, in Australia. And apparently the worm was still alive and wriggling when they removed the 3-inch parasitic worm from the woman's brain in the world's first surgery of such nature. So who knows what's floating around in our body and all along those lines. But I didn't know if you had seen anything in y'all's news about this, because I did see that, and I did see it was coming from Australia since we were on the science side. And I'm sure that Jacoby may have some thoughts and maybe even some humor about this worm that was apparently pulled out and all along those lines. But any thoughts around that, Shaquille? Because I did see that it was there in Australia.
Well, it certainly explains why so many people vote for the Labor Party. No, I won't do it. That just creeps me out. I don't know how everybody else feels about it, but that just really creeps me out. And there's a few, I haven't read the whole article because I did see it sort of flash up on my screen earlier in the day, but it just gives me a whole heap of questions. Like, is this something that, because if this is like the world's first surgery like this, so is this something where they've identified these worms in the past and haven't known how to get rid of them? And so you're just told, hey, look, there's this dude in your head, there's this worm sort of, getting around and we can't do anything about it. What do they normally do? Do they treat it with antibiotics? Or what normally happens here? Parasites just really creep me out. I've got the pest controller coming on Friday. Whether that'll do anything for parasites, I don't know. But after reading that, I was like, when was the last time I had the pest controller out? I better get him out. So,
yeah, agree. Any thoughts, Jacoby?
This is my nerd side. That's a mind flayer. That's what they used in Dungeons and Dragons to control people's minds. And they turn into these giant mind flayers, and the brain, the worms come out and they have big. Yeah, so that's the Dungeons and Dragons Stranger Things type thing. That's what happened.
I did already make the comment about voting for the Labor Party.
Yeah, you did make that. And stick it aside for a minute, then we'll get to definitely some of the other issues as well. But I also saw, because, we're here in North Carolina, me, Jacoby, and Nick and everything. And, there has always been concerns about tobacco. But apparently there is a new study that says that polluted air shortens humans' lifespans more than tobacco. So does this mean that people that were smokers can now go back to smoking, since apparently the air is the big problem and not necessarily the tobacco? And I do know that there's always those packages for those that are smokers, and I am not a smoker, but I do have friends that are.
So here's the question, right? So how are they conducting this study? Well, what do they do? Do they take people, because you have to do like a placebo study and all that sort of stuff. So what are they going to do? You're going to take some people and say, look, for the entirety of your life, we need you to live in a place where there's polluted air, and you can only breathe polluted air. And the other half of this group can only breathe clean air, and then we'll determine life expectancy. Obviously, they're not doing that sort of a study because you wouldn't legally or ethically be able to do such a study. So are they just making shit up as usual, or is there actually
Shaquille?
This would be the case, but where are they coming up with this nonsense?
That's not so far-fetched, Shaquille. You can have a placebo group not wearing a mask and one group wearing a mask, and see how they react to different viruses. Just theoretically, I'm just throwing that out there.
That could be a start.
It's interesting that you bring that up, because I had also read, and I think this was in an article yesterday, that there was concern, and I've said this for a while, about the mask, because apparently the mask is exposing you to contamination and everything. So that was a study that I saw recently where they were saying that the mask might actually be making the contaminants easier to go into your system. I guess if you're not cleaning the mask enough, if you're wearing
I saw the study also. I think it was South Korea. The toxicity of the mask.
I see that they're talking about bringing the masks back. There's been a new strain that they're talking about. I kind of think, well, we've kind of already been through this, and most people didn't like it at the time and don't like it now. I'm not sure what sort of compliance you're going to get with it. But just on masks, like I noticed that when I'm flying, where you're told you can take your mask off to eat and drink, but then you got to put your mask back on. Like, I don't know. It doesn't make any sense to me. But, if you're lucky enough to be able to fly when the place is locked down, you kind of just abide by whatever rules they impose. But I don't know how everyone else feels. But I think when you're sort of stuck with the mask on, I tend to always get a bit of a runny nose, and I end up coughing more than I normally would. And I don't know. I don't like wearing the masks, and those plastic like face shields. I'd prefer those than a mask if I had to have something, but apparently that doesn't count. So, how much this is actually keeping us safe, I don't know. And the amount of pollution that we've seen with these masks ending up in the oceans and things like that, I think we've really got to come up with something a bit better to tackle not just a new flare-up of COVID. But I think it's for our generation, our time, to be able to tell people in 100 years from now when we're all dead, this is what we did that worked and this is what we did that didn't work. Good luck. Right? Rather than doing what we already know is not working now.
The dirty little secret is some of us have facial hair. So how effective were these masks, even if they were effective for in general?
I mean,
I'm fairly clean-shaven, as you can see.
So the masks are, the medical field uses them in surgeries and everything else.
Why do they use them, Jacoby? It's very important. Why do they use them?
It's safe.
For droplets, sneezing, coughing, and blowing your nose. Not for aerosol. Not for respiratory. No.
That get stuck in the actual mist. I mean, isn't it the micron fiber or the fiber?
The last thing a doctor wants to do to an open room is sneeze or cough in it. Or spit.
And isn't that the reasoning behind the masks in the first place?
But not for respiratory illness. No.
Jovi, let's just say that you're right about your assertion that they're using masks in surgery. We also know that in surgery they wear robes, they wear latex gloves, they scrub all the way up their arms. They're also in a sterile environment. So should we all walk around demanding the government sterilize the place before we walk through? And I mean, it's not practical. Why
I agree it's not practical, and I agree that there needs to be a better technology to be able to help against these airborne viruses and all the other things that are out there. But what technology do we have? We can't even get people to take a flu shot, and that supposedly that will help, decrease the amount of flu in the area. We can't.
But why? Because the government and to some degree big tech and media have done such a bad job.
You keep blaming it on big government. We have so many anti-vaxxers that push out so much. RFK is one of the biggest anti-vaxxers out there, and he is being backed by so many people. So we have a ton of misinformation out there. It's not big government that's all doing a bad job. A lot of times it's us that do it to ourselves. I mean, we have to be honest about that. We can't keep blaming everything on somebody else.
Blame the government.
Misinformation is bred when you withhold information and don't.
No, misinformation is when somebody pushes it out and keeps pushing it out and just over. And for example, RFK keeps talking about. We'll talk about autism and the mRNA virus, the vaccine. Autism has never been linked to that, but yet RFK keeps saying that. RFK is perpetuating a lie, and he's got people who don't understand that it is not connected. So he's actually playing into their fears, and those same people are repeating that same thing as if it's a truth. It's the same thing, and that's not the government. That's an individual pushing out a lie. Misinformation is a bad thing, and that's what's killing us is because we believe this stuff.
So tell me, how do you know it's a lie?
It's not the government.
How do you know it's a lie?
There's actually studies.
There's millions of studies.
Just hold on a second, Jamie.
There's a place that you can go.
With what you just
I tell my graduate students this all the time. Rather than talking, God gives you 2 ears, so you do twice as much listening as you do talking. And there's a place you go to look at the studies. It's called SSRN.com, Social Science Research Network, the largest depository of academic studies in the world. One of the studies, and you can read more of me, will like to, said if you wear an H1 mask and the other person does, and one of you have the virus, it reduces the chance of contamination to 3%. If you have a mask and they don't, it's 14%. If both of you don't have masks, 97% chance you're going to catch the virus.
Nick, what kind of mask?
But again, Nick,
I agree with Jacoby. The people don't want to believe the study.
Nick.
Because they graduated in the top half of their high school. No, they didn't. They graduated in the top half of their medical school. No, they didn't. They graduated in the bottom half, bottom quarter, bottom 10% of their school, and they know better because Lord,
well, that sounds awfully
to get me to wear
that sounds awfully like
hold on a second.
And then you can
that sounds awfully like the
basic
precedent
study.
that you just
Nick,
elected.
hold on.
I wanna come back
Basic
to
study based
I wanna
on
come
our
back to
politics.
So
Those that actually follow the rules.
I agree with Jacoby. It's people. It's
And Nick, Mark, just one question. Mark, I just want to throw a question out to Nick and Jacoby. If masks work so well, are you guys wearing them now in general when you go out all the time? Why not? If you're not.
Not right now because the pandemic is down considerably.
So what? There are other things out there. There are other viruses out there.
I don't understand your point.
In my possession, the answer is yes. Can I get them in probably less than 2 minutes? I can have the H1N1.
But in general, you don't wear them when you're among the public.
In general, I do not wear them among the public. In general, I don't go
That doesn't make sense if you really think they protect you.
No, it doesn't make sense. See, please, if there is a pandemic and there's a high probability of catching a major disease like COVID, and remember,
or any disease, Nick. Why not flu, meningitis?
Well, a good question. You know, I am wearing it for flu and meningitis because H1N1 masks actually do work. There's no question about it. And
how about the cloth ones? And
the vaccines actually do work. There's no question about it. The real problem, this is where I agree with Jacoby 100%, is people in their little weak minds hear somebody saying it's a conspiracy theory by big pharma, and then they buy into this BS by some politician, and they don't bother to read the largest academic studies in the world. And when I was teaching graduate school at Northeastern University for 12 years as lead faculty there, I asked my graduate students, now these people had college degrees, and I said, when you go do your research, go look at ssrn.com. None of them even knew what it was. Now, how do you get a college degree and not know about ssrn.com, the largest depository of academic journals in the world? In other words, they even have academic.
Well, you tell us. You tell us. You've been in academics for a long time. You tell us how that happens. But I want to come back to Jacoby's.
I don't know how it happens.
About
the failure
of this original.
It's a failure. It's a failure of media. This thing should be on the media all the time. You want to read the studies? Go to ssrn.com. They're there.
I'd like to come back to Jacoby's previous point about the vaccines and the link between vaccines and autism. We know that study has been debunked over and over and over again. I forget the original guy's name, but we know that study has been debunked. But what they did was they selectively used mathematics and statistics in order to give them that result. But I find it fascinating to hear, because this used to be an issue on the left. The people on the left used to be the anti-vaxxers. But as soon as people on the right started doing it during COVID, all of a sudden, everyone on the left lost their mind and said, oh, they're all conspiracy theorists. But isn't it interesting that when it comes to things like the gender or racial pay gap in the United States or any other country, oh, no, don't worry about the mathematics.
Wow, you really went left field.
When it comes to the transgender studies, when it comes to transgender studies, everybody wants to ignore what Dr. Money did to those 2 kids up in Canada. Oh, no, completely ignore that. You know, the science doesn't matter, the maths doesn't matter, the studies don't matter if it doesn't fit your narrative. And it just so happens that your narrative, as usual, happens to be whatever the left government is pushing, that's what you're going to support.
You take an anti-vax base where the study was done on 12 individuals that was actually a poor study where the doctor himself lost his license to bring it to some type of hatred that you have for transgender.
Excuse me, what hatred do I have towards transgender people? No, excuse me, what hatred do I have? What hatred do I have to transgender people?
Hey,
Chad, these non-academics that are on the panel, all these studies have either peer review or not peer reviewed articles. Now, what does that mean? Peer review means third-party independent people actually look at your paper. Okay?
Nick, be honest about that. Nick, they look at your paper, but they don't get access to the underlying data.
No, they get the data.
They don't get the data. No, they don't. We had a guest on the show.
Yeah, you selectively fund the research that you want to fund. You selectively fund the people at the universities and colleges that are going to do this research. And by the way, let's just come back to what you just said. Let's just come back to what you just said before about the masks.
Universities with multi-billion-dollar endowments.
You said that transmission rates were 3%.
Don't even go there.
You said the transmission rates were 3%. You said that it's 3% when they're both wearing masks. It's 14% if one's not, etc.
Yeah.
How did they test that exactly? Did they get a whole heap of people in a room? And some people were COVID positive and other people weren't, and that's how they came up with that result. How exactly did they
that's how a lot of studies are done, Shaquille.
Here's some statistics and data that were simple. Now, the individuals that followed the guidelines listened to what the boogeyman Fauci was telling people. Dr. Fauci was saying, and others in scientific people were saying, they had a lower death rate than those who did not and actually fought against those. That is a fact. So those didn't get the vaccine, that actually didn't wear masks and did all this, they had a higher rate of death.
That's just simply not true.
What a surprise!
That's just not true. Okay, because you're racing in the people who don't live in the United States, who had other advice given to them about what vaccines to take, up to what Fauci said. Those people then would be worse off, and that's not true.
It's a fact, Shaq.
All right. Of course, if your government says that it's a fact, but if anyone else's government says it, it must be
the ones that are dead.
Shaquille, so second time out. First off, Larry, I warned you that this was going to happen and everything. I told Larry that this would happen at some point when we got into the heat of the discussion. So you see what I meant and all along those lines. So I don't know if you wanted to jump in. You did like you were doing the smart thing and just kind of like staying underneath the bullets that were flying and all along those lines. But I did warn you that this would happen. I was going to tease
Larry,
Shaquille real quickly as we get ready to go off the air and everything. But I did want to know if you're going to be running to China, because apparently China is giving a cash reward if you can find a bride that is 25 years old or under. So you got to find yourself a young bride, but apparently they're going to give a cash reward because they're trying to promote earlier marriages in that part of the country, because I think they've got a aging population. So I'm wondering if you're going to run over there to get one of these cash awards.
No.
What they could do is what America does. Instead of encouraging young people to get married and giving them the money and the resources to be able to buy a home, what they could just do is open up their borders and just let a whole heap of immigrants from across the world flood into their country. That could be a solution for them.
Flood into their country. You're talking of. Wait. We
do have somebody that is making a comment to you from LinkedIn. She said, or they say, John Oyami Fawal says, it's worth considering the points raised about SSM.com, but it's important to acknowledge that institutions play a crucial role in providing students with access to research resources. While SSM may not be available to all institutions, it raised the question of where the responsibility lies with the student or the institution when it comes to ensuring access to relevant resources.
Yeah. Well, SSRN, if you have a faculty appointment, I've written for SSRN because I had a faculty appointment with Northeastern University, you can have your papers published. But after writing papers for SSRN, some of my papers are not peer reviewed.
I've read some of your stuff, but that's certainly not peer reviewed, I can tell you.
Baby. Okay. But I've had some that are peer reviewed, like on the Journal of Accountancy, and that was a peer reviewed paper. So the important thing is peer review, because professors can get away with a lot of BS if they are not peer reviewed. They don't get away with BS if a third party independent reviews it and points out the BS. Your friend RFK, this Kennedy guy, Jovi, is he a medical doctor? Probably.
He's an idiot.
Oh, right. But Biden and Kamala Harris, they are medical people. And the legislature made up of lawyers, they're all medical people.
Sewer
Right?
education is beyond
Nick
that.
and everybody, we've got to get ready to bounce off because we've got Sasha's show coming up very shortly, and should be getting ready to start right about now. But this was a lively discussion, and like I said, definitely Larry's probably going like, I don't know if I'm going to come back or not. But these folks do look fun and all along that line. So glad that you were able to join us, and hopefully you'll be coming back in the near future as well. But we're going to get on out of here.
See you guys tomorrow. Take care. Larry, nice meeting you.
My pleasure. Thank you, gentlemen.
See you, Larry.